Hey ladies, welcome back to the show. I am your host Trisha. On today's episode, we are going to talk about some of the things that I hear about in my community of women and something that I've myself experienced and have felt a lot lately. Today we're going to talk about brain fog. And before we go any further, I want to say this loud and clear that this is a real thing. You're not imagining it. You're not going crazy. You are not lazy. As much as we talk about all of the things that are happening in your body with perimenopause, menopause, well, this is something real that's happening in addition to all of those. And we're going to talk about it and break it all down. I'm going to tell you exactly what's happening in your brain and body, walk you through the research that allows you to see the legitimacy of what's happening, and then more importantly, give you practical evidence-based strategies that you can start implementing today. So grab whatever cup of hot tea, coffee, water, diet soda that you have around, and let's get into it. First, let's define what brain fog actually is. It's not a medical diagnosis. It's typically something that we say as an umbrella catch term for a cluster of cognitive symptoms that you may be experiencing. This could be walking into a room and forgetting why you went in, difficulty retaining new information that you learned, trouble concentrating or staying focused, feeling like you're just really slow today, forgetting names, doctor's appointments, forgetting where you put your keys, all of those kinds of things. Does any of that sound familiar to you? If no, or if yes, really, you're not alone. Research tells us that somewhere between 44 and 62% of women report cognitive decline during menopause and perimenopause. That's nearly 2/3 of women. A UK survey by the Fawcett Society found that 73% of women experience brain fog during menopause. This is not a fringe experience. This is a majority experience. And yet, how many of us were warned about this? When we talk about perimenopause and menopause, we talk about irregular periods and hot flashes. But brain fog is this byproduct that I don't know that we talk about enough. And so today we're going to talk about it. Let's talk about why does it happen? Let's dive in a little bit into the science of brain fog. Well, there is this estrogen-brain connection. And here's what I want you to understand. Estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone, it's a brain hormone too. So you have these estrogen receptors that are found all throughout your brain, including in two areas critical for memory and cognition, the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Those are the areas responsible for learning, for memory formation, focus, all of those kinds of things. And we know that estrogen is actually doing something in the brain. Here are a few findings of some of the studies published in the International Menopause Society. We know that estrogen influences neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and dopamine, and both of those are critical for memory and focus. We know that estrogen regulates serotonin and norepinephrine. So what that means is that it regulates your mood and attention chemicals. Estrogen helps support blood flow to the brain, and it protects the neurons and promotes neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to form new connections. During perimenopause, estrogen levels don't just drop, they're fluctuating wildly. One day your hormones may be up, one day they may be down. And this unpredictability is actually what creates so much of the cognitive disruption that you may be experiencing. Your brain is trying to compensate for those changes in estrogen levels. So it's actually increasing the density of estrogen receptors in response. But that compensation process itself, as your estrogen is up and down, that is going to probably contribute to brain fog, mood swings, memory issues. But the good thing here that I want you to understand is all of this is temporary, because it's going to be up and down depending on what your estrogen and your hormone levels are like. It's not dementia, it's a transition phase. We talk a lot on here about when you're going through perimenopause and menopause, that your body is going through this transition phase. But I think we forget that our brain is part of that. And so this is just a reminder that your brain and any of the changes that you may be feeling is also part of that. But estrogen isn't the only player here when we talk about brain fog. We know that sleep disruption is very common during these hormonal changes, that you can have hot flashes, night sweats, or you just might not be sleeping that much. And we know that when you sleep, your brain clears out all of that waste that has been building up during the day, and it repairs itself. And so if you're having these sleep disruptions, it's hard for that to happen. We know that sleep deprivation impairs memory and attention. So when your estrogen disrupts your sleep, you know that you'll experience that you'll have some kind of change, or you may experience more brain fog. The other compounding factors here could be cortisol and stress. During this transition into menopause, many women see changes in the stress response, that you may have elevated cortisol levels, which is going to impact your memory. And chronic stress in itself creates a compounding effect that makes brain fog worse. One of the other things that happens during this phase is that you could have some blood sugar dysregulation, right? And so as a dietitian, I'm all into that estrogen actually plays a role in insulin sensitivity. As estrogen declines, especially as you head into menopause, many women become more insulin resistant. And so as your brain runs on glucose, the glucose that you get and that you need for your brain, it needs to be delivered steadily. But when you have blood sugar dysregulation, you're going to have more of ups and downs. And it's going to kind of have that like roller coaster pattern. And so you may notice that you have all these mood swings or brain fog related to that. And then lastly, declining estrogen is also associated with an increase in systemic, like all throughout your body, inflammation. And we know that if you get inflammation in your brain, it's called neuroinflammation. And that's also linked to some kind of cognitive decline. And so this is where this dietary piece and the things that you eat really can matter and have an impact very much on your everyday and how you feel in terms of your brain function. And there's research to back this up. So let's talk about some concrete research that we know. Well, there's one study, one of the largest running studies on women's midlife health, that talks about that there are these cognitive changes that happen during the menopause transition. There is another study that found that 40 to 60% of midlife women experience brain fog. That was clearly linked to hormonal functions, hormonal fluctuations, sleep disturbances, and increased stress. So it's not related to dementia, because I know all of us are like, oh my gosh, am I having early signs of dementia? No, it's related to the hormonal changes that are happening within your body. There's other studies published in JAMA that basically find that there is a connection between menopause transition and cognition, and they found that learning and memory are most affected during this perimenopause window. And then there's other studies that talk about brain fog, mood changes, and weight changes during perimenopause, were associated with poor cognitive and behavioral outcome later on, and that there was this underlying importance of early intervention. So this is why we're talking about this today, because there are things that you can do today that can help with this in the long term. So let's talk about the most important part. What can you do? Let's talk about some lifestyle strategies. So nutrition. This is my jam. This is what I love to talk about. This is probably why you're here. As a registered dietitian, this is where I get really fired up, because food can be a really powerful tool that you have available to you to help with your brain health. I have done an episode previously, many episodes ago, on this MIND diet. So the MIND diet is very similar to the DASH diet. The DASH diet is something that it's an intervention for people who have high blood pressure. And the MIND diet, it's a Mediterranean version of the DASH diet. It combines the best of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. And it's specifically designed with brain health in mind. So we'll talk about this quickly today. What we know when it comes to our brain is that there's foods that can really help and have a really good impact on your brain health. These tend to be things like leafy greens. Leafy greens eaten at least 6 times per week is very helpful for brain health. This includes spinach, kale, arugula, Swiss chard. All of these leafy greens are packed with folate, vitamin K, and antioxidants that will protect your brain cells. You will hear a lot about fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, and all of the recommendations are to have these foods at least twice per week. Omega-3 fatty acids are critical for brain cell membrane integrity, and they also help decrease neuroinflammation. I myself don't always have fish twice a week, so I do a fish oil supplement from Nordic Naturals to help give my brain that protective benefit of helping decrease any inflammation that could be happening in my brain. And so if you're not a fish person, or that you don't always eat it as often, then that might be something that you consider doing as well. We know that berries, all berries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, at least 2 servings per week has shown to improve memory. It's high in flavonoids, and that improves blood flow to the brain. You'll hear also things that are really beneficial, especially if you have high blood pressure, in the DASH diet, as also in the MIND diet. Nuts and seeds, especially walnuts, are a great source of omega-3 fatty acids, and they also can be really important to have in your diet. Olive oil, your primary fat, is rich in like these anti-inflammatory properties. So if you get a chance to cook, I would try to cook with olive oil. If you like your salads, maybe put some olive oil based dressing on it to help, just to kind of help with any inflammation that could be happening in your brain. And then also, importantly, is eggs, particularly eggs for the choline content that it has. Choline is a precursor to acetylcholine, and that's a neurotransmitter that we talked about that is essential for memory and focus. So those are the particular foods that have the most impact. Your leafy greens, your fatty fish, your nuts and seeds, your berries, your olive oil, and your eggs. They're going to have the most benefit when it comes to maintaining your brain health and decreasing any inflammation that might be happening in your brain. But these are the things that are going to cause inflammation in your brain. These are the things that we're going to talk about next that are going to increase that inflammation in your brain. These are things like any ultra-processed food. is associated with increased neuroinflammation. So when we talk about ultra processed, we're talking about your cookies, your chips, your anything that you're going to get that's going to have a lot of ingredients in it, that's going to be highly processed, your donuts, things like that you're going to read the label and be like, oh, these are the things that are making me gain weight, but these are also the things that are ultra processed, that are going through an enormous process in order to keep them and to make them taste good. We also know that added sugars and refined carbohydrates, this is going to be your junk food essentially, but the junk food that you're going to crave right now, especially if you're craving sweets, these are going to be the things that are going to cause blood sugar spikes that are going to directly impair cognitive function and drive inflammation. And these are the things that are also going to drive your insulin sensitivity. So these are going to be your cookies, your cakes, all of those kinds of things that are going to increase your blood sugar, your juices, your sodas, things like that are going to make your blood sugar spike when you eat them. All food is going to do that, but these are the things that are not going to have a lot of nutrition in them. They're going to be basically like all these ingredients, but not really something that's going to add vitamins and minerals to what you're eating. And then, of course, alcohol. This can be a tough one because I know we like to drink some alcohol on the weekends to unwind, but we know that alcohol can be a neurotoxin and it can disrupt your sleep cycle, and that can add to brain fog. So practically speaking, think having protein at every meal to stabilize your blood sugar. I'm not going to give you these enormous protein goals that most people are doing that they probably don't need. I'm talking about having protein at every meal that can help stabilize your blood sugar, that can also hopefully give you some omega-3 fatty acids. So this could be having your fish or your nuts and your seeds at some point during the day. And then loading your plate, at least half of it, with some kind of colorful vegetables, and then making sure that you're hydrated as well throughout the day, because you've all probably experienced that dehydration alone can significantly impair concentration. So when we're talking about what you can do on lifestyle strategies, that's the nutrition component of it. The second component here is exercise. This is the single best thing that you can do for your brain. One of the researchers, or as there's all this research on hormonal changes and brain fog, one of the researchers put it this way: to date, the single best treatment and prevention for brain health is movement, and the research backs this up completely. Exercise does several extraordinary things for the brain. Essentially, it helps grow new neurons and strengthen connections between the brain cells. It improves cerebral blood flow, so you're getting more oxygen to your brain. Exercise decreases any inflammation that can be happening in your brain. It improves sleep quality, and it improves insulin sensitivity, which, as we've discussed, directly impacts brain function. And I don't know about you, but more lately, I've been experiencing brain fog, but I've been pulled in so many directions in my life. And so I'm not exercising as much as I normally do. And I feel like I'm in this place where my brain just feels like I just feel like I'm in a fog all the time, and there's nothing that I can do and no amount of caffeine that can help it. But sleep does seem to be something that is able to help it. So let's talk about what kind of exercise will help you with your brain health. A 2023 study found that a combination of aerobic exercise, strength training, yes, very important during this time, flexibility and balance work significantly improved executive and global cognitive function in postmenopausal women. So the answer is that you need a variety of different exercises. Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per week. So that's 150 minutes of walking, cycling, swimming, anything that you're doing cardio. I know that there's all of this talk now, like you don't need to do any cardio, you just need to do strength training. But I think there is some importance of having a combination of different things to help with different things that are happening in your body. Because strength training is still really important, and we know that 2 to 3 sessions of strength training is important in general as you go through this time to counteract any muscle loss. But we know that in general, strength training is also helpful because it impacts metabolic health, your blood sugar, and then ultimately brain health. And then even short bouts of movement. So even if you're going for a walk, but you're just doing 10 minutes, it is going to be really helpful. First, for blood sugar management, they always say like one of the best things you can do for your blood sugar is walking after you eat, because you're able then to get all of that sugar that's kind of sitting in your body. Exercise is the key to get that sugar into the cells. And so if you're able to eat something and then go for a walk, all of that sugar that is sitting in your cells from the food that you've just eaten, if you're able to exercise afterwards, it's the key. It gets all that sugar into your cells, and then it will also help with brain function, because if your blood sugar is improved, then so is the risk of having cognitive decline because your sugar's all over the place. The third thing here, and we're talking about 4 lifestyle factors, so nutrition, exercise. The third is, of course, what you would expect, sleep. Sleep is non-negotiable. And I want to be clear here that sleep is not luxury. It's not a lifestyle luxury. For your brain to function, it's a biological requirement. And in perimenopause and in menopause, this is usually where we kind of lose control the quickest, and then everything else kind of topples. Research shows that less than 7 hours of sleep is associated with impaired memory, attention problems, and increased risk of long-term cognitive decline. And so what we know helps is to keep your bedroom cool, because if it's too hot, you may have night sweats and hot flashes, which are major sleep disruptors. Typically, when we're talking about a cooler room, you all know what I'm talking about. A 65 to 68 degree Fahrenheit room temperature may help you sleep better. Limiting alcohol and caffeine before you go to bed, creating a wind down routine that you're getting a low stimulation about an hour before bed, and then having consistent sleep and wake times, even on the weekends. Your circadian rhythm is your brain's internal clock and thrives on consistency. And then lastly, in terms of lifestyle recommendations, is stress management. Chronic stress is the silent brain fog amplifier. When you are chronically stressed, you have chronic levels of cortisol, and then over time, that's going to have an impact on your brain protection. The evidence supports doing a mindfulness meditation. So this is a study that was published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, found that a 12-week meditative yoga program significantly improved both verbal and visual spatial memory in women over 55. Cognitive behavioral therapy is essentially helps women manage the impact of the perimenopause or menopausal symptoms, which reduces that stress load that you may have on your brain. But more importantly, and I think things that you can do daily in terms of managing your stress, like breathing and breath work, journaling, time outside, all of these things are going to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and lower cortisol levels, which are going to be protective. The lower the cortisol levels, the more protected your brain is going to be. And then I think also in this, you're going to be also needing to do something that is enjoyable for you. in terms of memory training. We know that a randomized trial found that memory training significantly improved verbal memory and executive function. You don't have to do a formal training program, but the key is to do something consistently that's going to challenge you mentally. And this can be something like reading books. People are doing things like puzzles and strategy games or creative work or Sudoku, things like that. Reading physical books will also engage your brain differently than using a screen, learning something new like an instrument, a skill, a language, and more importantly, staying socially connected. We know of all of the things in terms of longevity research that social engagement and social connections is one of the strongest predictors of cognitive longevity. So as we end this episode, I want to remind you that the vast majority of women that are having symptoms like me, like you, such as brain fog, is likely temporary, and it may be more pronounced right now because you're going through this actual transition. But it's not dementia. There is emerging research that talks about this critical window hypothesis, the idea that menopause transition is important. It's this important window when it comes to brain health. And there's actually, especially when you're thinking about hormone therapy for menopause, there is this concept that estrogen, like we've talked about, has neuroprotective properties that can support brain health, enhance blood flow, and reduce neurodegeneration. And so the hypothesis here is that doing hormone therapy provides that cognitive and cardiovascular benefit, and that if you're able to initiate this hormone therapy at the onset of menopause or before the age of 60, that there may be some impact and improvement on your cognitive function. And so that's a hypothesis. It's not something, it's just kind of something that they're thinking. And there may be this idea that if you were able to start, or if you started hormone therapy later, that you may lose that cardioprotective efficacy that they found if you started hormone therapy earlier. And so it's just something to kind of talk about. I myself am in menopause. I am not on hormone therapy, but I'm always thinking about the things that are potential that could maybe help me. And so maybe that's something that could help you too. Again, that's a hypothesis that they're studying. But I think all of the things, what's the most exciting is that having this information allows you to do something now, and with changing your food or building on what you're already doing with your food and movement and sleep and stress. All of these matter enormously when it comes to long-term brain health, and that you have something that you can do to help that. If you have a significant history of Alzheimer's or dementia and somebody under 60 in your family has it, that's going to be something that you may be at higher risk. So you may need to talk to a neurologist and just kind of have a baseline evaluation and to kind of talk to them also about what you can do to support your brain through this hormonal transition that you're going through. So kind of as we wrap up, I just want to remind you that you're not losing your mind. Your brain is adapting just like your body's adapting. And with the right support, you can do that and you can support yourself beautifully. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it, because too many women are suffering in silence, thinking something is seriously wrong with them. And actually what's happening is completely explainable, and it's something that you can hopefully do to address it. So I thank you for your time today. I will see you next week, and take good care of your brilliant brain that is going through lots of changes.